is easy. Up on the mountain, you've got peace of mind. You never know when things change. Down in the valley, don't lose faith, for you're never alone. The God of the mountain, He's the God in the valley. When things go wrong, you make them right. The God of the good times, He's the God in the bad times. The God of the day, He's the God of the night. Talk faith. Way up on the mountain, talk comes so easy, like that is down in that valley. Trial and temptation, that's when our faith really puts you to the test. God of the mountain, He's the God in the valley. When things go wrong, He'll make them right. The God of the good times, He's the God in the bad times. God of the day, He's the God in the night. God of the good times, but He's the God in the bad times. God of the day, He's the God in the night.
We are in Mark chapter 14. We're going to read this and talk about it today. Father, thank you for your word. You've given us exactly what you intended. When you spoke to all of these writers, all of these prophets and all of these apostles, and you've given us exactly what you wanted to know about you. This book is the revelation. It's a revelation of who we really are. It's a revelation of what the world, what reality looks like. But it's also the revelation that you reveal to us who you are. We've been living around with that you not told us. We didn't go out worshiping pieces of wood and stone and then be carved to look like something. Somehow good personality did and human and you, the true and living God that created us, has spoken. And so we also together. And Jesus, we walk here among us. And this happened to you. So would you interpret? Would you help us? And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. We are in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 14, verse 1. Now the Passover and the festival of unleavened bread were only 2 days away, and the chief priests and the teachers of the law were scheming to arrest Jesus secretly and kill him. Holy God. What a statement that is. Here's the quote from them, but not only the technical picture, or the people were right. Religious leaders, they just sometimes they don't trust God at all, and they figure that, okay, crazy, right? Think of the millipedes as one of the just one church in the name of religion. Well, it's not the reason why here. It's happening. Now get this. So we're going to talk about this, right? And then I'd like to read the verse 10 with me, please. Will you? Okay. Verse 10. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12, went to the chief priests to betray to Jesus for them. They were delighted to do this and promised to give him money, so he looked for an opportunity to hand it over. Is that dark or what? I mean, what a dark and awful thing. I mean, everything is coming to a head. The plan of the Jewish leaders to kill Jesus and the plans of Judas with his own agenda to try to force Jesus into action, thinking he was some kind of military messiah, and so he could make a few bucks on his time. I mean, this is dark stuff. It was a crazy moment in history. Everything was blowing apart. It seemed out of control. It felt that everything was coming to a head. The tension in this whole situation had just reached a fever pitch. But what happens between these two pictures of darkness and Gabriel is one of the true beautiful moments in the whole Bible. Verse 3. While he was at Bethany, reclining at the table of the homeless woman and leper, a woman with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. And some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, what is this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages. The money given to the poor, they will give her harshly. Leave her alone, she said. Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them anytime you want, but you will not always have me. She did what she could. She poured perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, the human burial also be told in your language. It's not a beautiful word. Total darkness, right? I mean, things were just flying off the hook everywhere. Really terrible things. This is 2 days before the crucifixion of Jesus. Jesus got 48 hours left to go. It was a dark life. So you might know a super dark time in your life. And it was a dark time for all of them. And what I want you to see is what they did in the midst of that very dark moment. You know what they did? They threw a party for Jesus. Can you imagine? That's an amazing thing. The leaders are looking for a way to kill Jesus. And Judas is looking for a way to put Jesus in that situation so he'll respond and show him all he's the king, defeat Rome and do all this stuff. Because he had wacky ideas about the crazy, about the king. But in the darkest moment, God was at work. I want you to see this. All of this was coming together, and it was terribly dark, right? But now we know the rest of the story. We know of his death, burial, and resurrection. That this crucifixion was God's will for his son, Jesus. So he could take the guilt and shame and curse of the human race on himself when he died on the cross. The Jewish leaders wanted him eliminated so they had power and they didn't have to compete with this guy. Judas just wanted to force Jesus to make a few shekels on the side. By the way, it says here that they yelled at Mary about the gift she made to Jesus during the party. The guy leading it was Judas. John tells us in John chapter 12. And he didn't say it because he cared about the poor, John said. Old John in the story. He was sitting there. He said it because Judas held the money back to the group and took out whatever the heck he wanted for himself. Whatever the heck he wanted. I think that's what he agreed. But that's what he did. He did that. And it was a very This thing. And then, all of this is coming down, but God made it all dovetail together and work out for the benefit of the whole world. This was God's plan. It might look really dark to you right now, but I want you to know, in the midst of the darkness, God's working out His plan. Nobody can thwart Him. He's working on your behalf. If you trust in Him, He's working on your behalf. He's going to get you through this. You're going to do it. I drove by the old wild, Pontiac. Most of you aren't old enough to remember that job. But it was me and about 25 other Jewish kids that took our swimming lessons there back in the early 1960s. Yeah, 60, 61, something like that. It was way back. We were just a bunch of little funky kids trying to learn how to swim, and we had this instructor. I drove by there the other day, and it's for sale. I'm like, I'm not sure. You're fully on fire. And these things are cool with the old building. It was a cool place. So there was this one little kid who wasn't very good swimmer. He put attention to classes, what they do, and all that kind of stuff. And so in the last day, my parents all came to watch us Saturday morning to watch us swim. And so we swam. And most of us swam. This kid didn't swim, he swam. Okay? And he was a big kid. He was the biggest one in our group. And I remember his mother screaming, "Save my boy!" And he just freaking out in the grandstand. 4 or 5 rows of kids are, "Save my baby!" And our swimming teacher, he just stayed on the side and watched us through the kid bob and stuck some water in the bottom of his head. He waited for a while to make sure all the timing was right, and when the timing was right, he jumped in, pulled the kid out, and mother screamed, "Why did you save him earlier?" And then he was quite the fool. He told her that. He said, "You got a big kid there. If I jump in here, you can grab on the knee and both of them." And I'm not doing it. I don't want him to get desperate enough before I get so up. He's just about at the end. I'll grab him. We'll get the water out of his leg. Wasn't a big deal to this guy. It looked really dark, but also there's not to our swimming coach. He knew what was happening. He was just letting it play out slow. Let him try to do it. Like the scripture says, when the time is fully come, God sent forth His Son, made of a woman, made under the law, that He might redeem those under the law. The timing was perfect. This is a very dark moment. It looks terrible to everybody, but not to God. He's at work in the midst of the battle. So what did they do? They threw a party. And at this party, there is a group of really interesting people. First of all, it's Bethany. Bethany is a big deal in the gospel. There's Jesus there a lot, doing a lot of things in Bethany. And it says here in our text that Simon the leper was there. Do you remember Simon's story? When Matthew records the story of Simon approaching Jesus, by the way, that was against the Jewish law. So the leprosy, you had to stay far enough away. He came up to Jesus, fell at His feet, worshiping Him, and said, "Lord, if you want to, you can make me clean." And you know what Jesus did? Man, Simon, this is talking about Simon. That's who was Matthew put the people. He had pulse on him. I mean, he was at the end of that and at the beginning of that. He had been away from his family for decades. We don't even know. But it's been told. Lord, if you want to, you can heal me. And then you can. And Jesus said, "I will." And He did something that had nothing to Simon and do. He reaches out and He touched him. He had not had a human touch on him. Here's Simon. He's here. Where is He at? He's at His house. The guy had not been in His house forever. Couldn't be around his family, couldn't be with his wife, couldn't be involved in the normal society of life and the commerce of life. He had lost it all. And now here he is. They're throwing a party for Jesus. Simon's sitting there in His house. If you read John chapter 12, there's somebody else is saying that. His name is Lazarus. You remember Lazarus? Lazarus had been stone cold, stinking dead for 4 days in a Middle Eastern culture in a tomb. When Jesus went with his sisters to the tomb, he laid down. He let him die there, because Jesus knew what he was going to do. And I love it. It's a funny verse in the King James Version. Because when they get to the tomb, he says, roll the stone away. And Martha, the practical one, she goes, oh, in the King James English, Lord, by now, he stinketh. He stinketh. That's what I was doing. And he really did. By the way, if you haven't seen the Chosen depiction of the resurrection of Lazarus, go on YouTube. I think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. Absolutely. Lazarus was stone cold, stinking dead. And he's sitting at that table with the guy who had body parts falling off of the end of that disease. Who else was there? Mary and Martha was there, according to John's depiction of it. I love this about the New Testament. All the writers of the Bible, the writers of the Gospel, when they would write about what they saw, they all bring their own perspective and they bring different details to the story. And people try to find contradiction in that. It's just proof that it came naturally in their observations. If this was a contrived book, all the stories would be exactly the same from the same perspective. This is what investigators look for proof in text from my court that is wrong. Tell me about also the girls over there. Those are the girls that had their hearts broken, were disillusioned with Jesus, they were angry with Jesus. Lord, if you'd have blamed him, my brother wouldn't have died. I mean, they were all upset. And Jesus wept along with them and said, "Come away." Those girls are their babies, man. I know it's a family house in Bethany. By the way, when the Bible talks about Bethany, there's a couple times in the Gospels it says, Jesus went to Bethany, the town of Martha and Mary. Do you know how unusual it was in those days to live women in that kind of a situation? What a beautiful thing. Oh, they heard that place. Oh, it's the town, baby. So Martha, the one who kind of took charge of the town, when she found out Simon was thinking about throwing a big party for Jesus, she heard Simon and Lazarus talking about it. She goes, oh, no, come on. Okay, Simon, we'll have it at your home. I'm doing the dinner. Okay. I see Martha as being like fancy Nancy here. Nancy was just a way of trying to, she's a food girl. She's just no old Sicilian. She's not, oh, no problem, I'll take care of it. I'm going to do it. That's the way it's away. Martha, I mean, this is important. And listen, in the midst of this great darkness, at this moment in history, they throw a party for Jesus. What is Thanksgiving for us? Oh, we all know what it sounds like. Oh, praise the Lord! Yeah, we all know how it sounds, right? You know, like Jesus said, he quoted the passage, these people draw near to me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. We love some stuff, right? But what does real Thanksgiving look like? They're not what it sounds like. Real Thanksgiving. In the darkness, they threw a party for Jesus to thank him for what he has already done for them. They had no idea what the future was. They had no idea, right? Jesus has been talking about crucifixion, about dying, about all this stuff. They have no idea what's going on. They have no idea what's about to happen. If you remember after the resurrection, Jesus had to chase the down down and prove it to them. I mean, it was really something. But in the midst of that darkness, there's Thanksgiving. Was that this dark, only unbelief was Jesus that made it. Isn't that a beautiful thing? To me, that's so good. I had one friend that had her life turned upside down a year or so ago. And in the midst of the hardest time of her life, she forgave me. So separated. She did right along. I mean, it was a step. she was a beautiful little woman. She didn't have much. But she was a sweet little powerful thing. And she thought, I promised that I just want to thank you for being with me. I'm so grateful that you did. I love it. It was beautiful, man. Well, these guys took it back to the next moment. They saw a party for Jesus. That's Thanksgiving. That's what Thanksgiving is. In the midst of the darkness, to stand in that faith that you know that it is done for you and bring it to you. I never knew my cousin was Christ. My mother was Christ. My mother had a cousin that lived here in Silver Lake on a bill to us. He was just a loving my cousin did. True guy. When he said to me, hey, you got a cousin you've never met before, my friend. He lives in San Diego, California. So he came out and this early summer, and we played golf. That was built up. We went to get the car on the crossing. And we played, and I got to know him. He's just a wonderful guy. I get to all the time. Just like many people are just grateful for their life. You know, wonderful to be around people like that. One was considered very fun. And I started fifth grade as a Christian. It was wonderful to be around, but then my brother Jerry died in the July. He sent me about it. Told me how he was. You know, you don't get letters very much anymore. You get a text. No, people tend to take you don't need to do it actually message about him. He knows how hard it is to leave a brother because he doesn't get it enough for my phone. Anyway, I told you that story to tell you this. I was going to write him down, and I was looking for his address. I thought, I still have the address. So I finally made it, and there's no address on the return address in the front, but there it is in the back. You want to know where this guy lives? You want to know where he lives in San Diego? I've never seen this. He lives on Thanksgiving Lane. For real. I'm not making that up. I'm not answering to this, okay? He lives. He lives on Thanksgiving Lane. Shouldn't we live here? They threw a party for Jesus. Number two, I won't say this for you. It was pleasant. Many days were friendly. It's an alabaster container. When somebody brings an alabaster container into something, this is beyond any knowledge, okay? This is the highest end of the highest good. Homes, when they have something precious, they will put it in a carved alabaster box. That stone can be carved easily, and the stonemakers know how to do it. They make you can see all kinds of items from antiquity that are made out of alabaster. The beautiful alabaster box is completely wrong. And they didn't know what to do, but they knew it had to be perfect. I was up at the car store. I don't know if that's surprising to you, but I was up at the car store. And my friend Marty said, oh, Tom, you're going to see what's so into it. He reaches behind the counter, and he pulls out a 1930s hard case that is homemade in the 30s. It's beautiful. I saw that container, and I thought, something good about the tomato roll. Now what I need is good. Woo! Just beautiful. Well, who told this alabaster container out? Maybe. And he takes it. It's made of pure knowledge. It's perfume, pure knowledge. I don't know anything about it, okay? I would bore you to death if I could talk to you about Himalayan vegetation and what flowers they get this oil from. I can hardly tell the difference between a lily and a daffodil. Okay, if I talk about nard, I'm just going to know it. Okay, I can't find this, but it's super expensive stuff. Ignore what Mary does. Doesn't open it. She breaks it. And no going back. She breaks it and she drinks it over the her Jesus. And John comes up off of her feet. She drinks it with her. And this knowledge, the guy said it here, it was worth more than a year's wages. Seriously. That's when somebody would make taking out of oil was $70,000. which is younger and very deep. Basically, a part of it is a walking gift. And then he breaks the container. There is no going back. Remember Alexander the Great, when he and his forces left ships into Asia Minor to fight their war. Alexander the Great had his ships burned. So that all the soldiers knew, ain't no going back. This is no way to go. That's what matters to him. He's not going to try to recapture this oil. It's broken. It's gone. He's going to die. He's out on that. So beautiful. He was immediately rebuked harshly, it said. So they go right after them. You know when you try to do something good and someone misunderstands you and they break your heart? I'll find that. There's nothing to it. And I remember when he was first year of their marriage, their first Christmas, his three wives brought him a beautiful watch that had it engraved into the altar. And a soul was standing around. I think laughed and then decided to have it. You know, you gotta be kidding. Maybe we just real talk with something. I mean, there's always going to be somebody for this country. So, I mean, people who we often say are people who love themselves, not Jesus. So, you will be intimidated by when you lay your life down for Jesus, they're going to think you're a Jesus freak. They're going to take back consequences. Just do it. Break up. You can do it. Go out and get home. Bring it back. You know, these are the times that when Jesus is going through the hardest times in his life, when he's struggling, because we know it's coming, these are the guys that either fell asleep or the guys that would start debating among who is the greatest among them. And Jesus changed the world with this group of losers. Isn't that great? There's hope for all of us, right? There's hope for all of us. Here they are debating who's the greatest. I'm trying to lose the greatest among them. Mary and Bethany. They threw the party and she loved Jesus. That's why it's so beautiful. Love Jesus. But another place is especially hated. And, you know, let me tell you one of the things I love, not if you work so much. This was understood for Mary in dowry for when she gets married. She was holding a position in dowry. You know what Mary was actually giving to Jesus at this party? The gift. This is the most important thing to do. Jesus is being given by Mary for his future. She's waiting for Jesus. She refuses to see all of this for all of these loved ones, and all she could do was raise her future tonight at his feet. How beautiful. So, if Jesus gains her fortune in the darkness, it might be going through a terrible and awful time in your life. If you can still lay your life down and your future down at the feet of Jesus, who will prepare for you, to you, he will get you through. He's going to do it. So they had a party. They brought presents one last time. It was powerful. Let me tell you how it's powerful. First of all, Jesus said some things about it. It is so powerful to Jesus. He told us something. He says, when they start telling her about how big of a waste this is, Jesus said, stop. She's going to be beautiful for you. Beautiful. And this word is the highest form of beauty that could be used in the language. It means perfect, excellent, magnificent, moving beauty. It's moving. It's beautiful. All she is that she has done a beautiful thing to me, not for me, but to me. You know, Jesus takes it personally. Let me say what I bet that we had there yesterday was in Luke. Football players in St. Mary's. What a believer. I'm telling you what, I feel like I could jump on him to get him under the water. So good. Oh my God. Well, it's a feeling there's so much here. We just have to do that. Look at that. He's a big boy. I love this kid. His face is so simple and so beautiful. And he loves his football coach. He's a wonderful Christian and a good Bible teacher. He's got great support, but he's just home along to the baptism. So we baptized him. Now, I just had fun with him. I enjoyed him. We talked, we laughed, I encouraged him. I gave him a couple of books. And I wanted to look at giving some websites that are set in the Bible through that kind of stuff. And his leader, Wendy, and the Father's Jesus, Jenny, good people. But I always wonder what the leader would do. Now, I'm not even doing it for his son, but I'm doing it to her. She's so good. She said, whatever you do, is to use the root of my life. You've got it to me. Incredible person. Very fun. We go to a place to walk out in the house. One day we're walking through the back steps and saying, and just going out of the corner of my head, there is a young father playing with his three kids. He's running around with him to turn on. He's getting kind of crazy. Mom's sitting on the bench. Looking at the father. Because what he was doing with his children, he was doing it to his life. And people close to him. That he loves his friends, that he would love his children. It's not beautiful about this. You do it, whatever you do it for Jesus. Here's some ideas. When you say no to a prostitute, you do it to Jesus. When you help an old man with his yard, you do that to Jesus. He said, you're close to him. When you forgive something first and let it go, not because you have the power to do it, but because Jesus thinks so, you do it to Jesus. Beautiful. Oh, it was beautiful. It's a wonderful, wonderful film. In the darkness, in that terrible life, it was powerful for another reason. I mean, about the present, man got the present. And it was beautiful. It was also beautiful to everybody else there. Because it all affected John particularly. When she broke open that jar and poured it over Jesus' head, it says, and the aroma of the perfume for them. You keep doing what you do. You keep doing it. You keep walking in the darkness. You keep throwing powder for them and remember it. That's done for you. You'll be beautiful everybody. And to close, some of the clowns that are trying to sass Mary for her getting the great gifts, wherever this gospel is taken anywhere. Do you see God's bigger things? God doesn't see the trouble of the moment right now. He does. But that's not what he reacts to. He said, wherever this gospel is preached throughout the world, this wasn't the end, baby. This is just the beginning. The whole world is going to be transformed. Billions of people were going to be ushered into the family of God, to the sacrifice of God's Son. This was all going to happen. And Jesus said, whenever this gospel is preached throughout the world, we're going to tell this story as an announcement to him. Jesus does not forget what you have done. Listen, truly I tell you, always give yourself fully to the work of the Lord, Paul said. Because you labor in the Lord is not in vain. Who remembers? And you better remember the name. So I'm going to I'm not going to the Lord is not quickly to realize in his hands his important plan. You are Indians with stuff to kill people. You keep doing this stuff. Father, please and Lord. And we all know, who is like one of the few people that live God, and you're grateful. So, as a great gift, we know you're content to bless all your people who transfer in the darkness. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you would like to support Community Bible Church, we would appreciate your prayers and gifts. We can be reached at Community Bible Church, 1888 Crescent Lake Road, Waterford, Michigan, 48327, or at our website, www.cbcmi.com. We'd appreciate your gifts. We know that many can't give right now, so if you would, you'd be a great blessing to your brothers and sisters. God bless you. Have a great day.